Good evening, everyone. So it's my pleasure to welcome everyone to the first day of the Quality Week 2021, organized by the Colombo Quality Camp. So we are so excited to have you all here today. Now I would like to extend a special welcome to our keynote speaker, Marit Bhairavi, Principal Test Engineer at Vaisala, who is joining with us all the way from Finland. And she is a result-oriented software development professional with a focus of testing. In 2019 and 2020, she was among the top 100 most influential in ICT in Finland. And also, she is a programmer, speaker, author, and community facilitator. So no wonder that she has been awarded the two prestigious Global Testing Awards, the most influential Agile Testing Professional Person 2016 and Eurostar Testing Excellent Awards in 2020. So in this evening, she'll be walking us through the exploratory testing, explain and experience. And yeah, now it's time for the session. So over to you, Marit.
All right, everything should be set up.
Yeah.
All right, so good evening, everyone, and it's a real pleasure for me to be part of your event here today and get to open your Quality Week. You know, as far as I'm concerned, every week and every day is Quality Week and Quality Day, because I just love this whole aspect around working on quality, working on testing, figuring out how we can improve our software and improve our systems. And today I wanted to talk to you about exploratory testing, and not actually just only talk to you. So I'm kind of trying to prime you a little bit here to be ready for it. We are doing a few very, very small exercises as part of this talk, and we'll be doing them by using Zoom's the chat functionality. So when you need to be coming up with your tests, we'll use that one to pass your ideas, and I'll pick up then the tests from that angle. But without further ado, let's jump into the topic. For me, I've been an explorer tester basically since day one of my career, and that's now been a 25-year career for me. And it has taken me quite many years to figure out what it is exactly that this exploratory testing is about. I know that it was a word first coined by Kem Kainer back in 1984. So that's what, 37 years ago, if I can calculate in my head almost correctly. So it's been around for quite some time, but also even 37 years ago when the term was coined by Kem, back then, I had colleagues here in Finland who didn't know the term, but were actually already testing in this style. And the style is kind of, you know, set around this idea of exploring. So you have something in mind, you have an intent, you go search for the bugs, you go search for the information that no one else has yet. And with that goal in mind, you set out to unknown territories. You have ideas of what kind of things you would recognize as, you know, the reward that you're looking for. But actually, if you end up finding, you know, a new country like America for the explorers of the past, you're not exactly disappointed when it's not, you know, that bucket of gold that you were looking for, but it is being able to claim whole new territories as yours. And this whole idea with exploratory testing, it's really this idea of focusing on results. So there's been this tagline of better tests, and also better testers, because they're supposed to grow every single day. But also some research, especially this research by Itkonen done in Finland, showed in 2007 in this little experiment that they achieved exactly the same results with preparing test cases and without preparing test cases, which was the exploratory testing. But they received significantly less false alarms. So all of the quality of the bugs they were finding was higher, and they were able to process them better. But also they had to pay, as in pay in time, people, they had to pay less in time when they were applying exploratory testing. And my evidence so far in the real company says that, maybe if this little 2007 experiment wasn't done on complete newbies and students, maybe if it was done on actual professionals in the companies, we wouldn't get the same results. We would get better results, because that's what I keep seeing every single day in the organizations that actually apply wider scale exploratory testing. And this is something that it's still a little difficult in my current organization. We started off really strong idea of test cases and test case and requirement traceability. And we've been missing bugs for years. And in the last 2 years that I spent here, I have actually been now introducing these ways that enable us to find the bugs within the testing, where we, weren't always as successful as we would like to be in the thinking that we were doing while testing. So this is what exploratory testing is. Basically, you go out with this purpose. You have this bucket of gold in mind that you go look for. And our bucket of gold as testers is always this idea that you find some information that others may have missed. So it is usually not that we are supposed to find all the problems. We can't. That's too much to ask from anyone. It's not that we're supposed to be the ones who do the only testing that is happening. There's developers will test their own things. Other people, other testers might also be participating in the testing. But depending on what our assignment is, whether we are system testers or acceptance testers, we still go in at our own scheduled time within that frame of working. And we are supposed to find something that the others have missed. And we do that in exploratory testing by basically looking at the application or looking at the specifications and thinking of those as part of the product. They're kind of like, making us more creative. So sometimes, well, actually a lot of times, I feel like when I am actually hands-on with the software, it's like the software is whispering to me, it's speaking back to me, and I do something and it's saying kind of like, oh, you clicked here, but did you notice there's an empty space there on the other side of the screen? Maybe you should click there as well. And sometimes, in hindsight, I can explain why did I do that. But in that moment, some of these skills, kind of like where do I drive my car, what kind of techniques do I use, it is so well built into me that it's almost as if the software itself was suggesting me to be the most creative person I can be as a tester. And on the other hand, working in agile teams as an exploratory tester, I find that a lot of times I am my developers' external imagination. I've had my developer colleagues very often looking and saying like, Marat, oh, I know you'd want me to test this. I'm like, I didn't say a word. I didn't say anything. You're just imagining, but yes, you're imagining correctly. So please, yes, do test that. And then it becomes funny when they're actually finding the problems when they're imagining me coming after them. And that's when they're doing the right kind of work. So many of the developers that I work with nowadays are exactly like these really brilliant exploratory testers, as long as they can have external imagination. And they might sometimes need a quality coach or a tester as that kind of like, amplifier imagination there. I have this quote here also on this slide on the solitary introspection without active experimentation being daydreaming. It's something I found just last week as a quote, and it really speaks to this idea of external imagination, that if you are not actively experimenting when you're doing exploratory testing with that application, to a non-rehearsed eye, it might actually look like you're not doing anything or you are just clicking. Whereas what sets the thing that we do as testers apart from daydreaming or just clicking buttons in a random way, it's what is in here, what's in our head, the things that we're thinking that enable us to interact with the application. I often come to various products and projects and little applications and little tools with this idea that, I am an exploratory tester. There's no other way for me to test. There's a lot of techniques I can apply within the context of the approach of exploratory testing, but I always approach things from an exploratory tester's mindset. And there was one particular product that I looked at a few years ago. It's a testing tool called Approval Tests. And I was working back then with the developer who created the tool. And I was asking permission on kind of like, can I use this as a demo tool and something that I would teach with? And it's like, yeah, sure, go for it. It's all written test first. So it's code that he's very, very proud of. And this particular quote here, it's actually his word in a podcast where he gave an interview. And the interesting part about the interview comment was that he says that I destroyed his application in like an hour and a half. And obviously, I didn't destroy anything. It was broken already when I came in. So the only thing that I really destroyed is his idea that things were working in the first place. But I did offer him a lot of feedback, even in that very shallow and narrow time frame of the first hour and a half. And it actually took me weeks after that to insist that some of the early feedback that I was giving within that 1.5 hours was actually something where he needed to completely change his API, or his users wouldn't be getting the benefits that he was thinking they should be getting. So there were many different kinds of illusions that had to be broken. And it is not just the testing and reporting that breaks those illusions, but it is the work of having the conversations and then making those decisions together on changes that actually does that. So with that kind of general introduction, I wanted us to get a little bit of kind of like hands-on or exercise-oriented way of experiencing what kind of things are related to exploratory testing. And I've been teaching this for quite many years now with this idea of testing mathematics, which is originally created kind of like a bit like a tongue-in-cheek type of commentary. I used to work as a researcher and I was researching testing. And I had multiple professors who were guiding my work at different times. And one of the professors, when I tried to show him my testing research, said that, no, that's not testing. That's that's requirements management. And I'm like, no, I really don't try to show you requirements. The other professor said what I was doing is risk management. And the third professor claimed that what I was doing is configuration management. But it absolutely, to their eyes, wasn't testing. And it took me back already in those days a little bit of effort to realize that I should not be explaining to the smart professor men what testing is if they think they already know it. And I should turn the question around and ask, well, what is it then? And they told me that they expected that if I was researching testing, I would come up with this mathematical formula where you take a specification here and you put it into the machine where your formula is kind of coded in, and out comes the test cases that find all the bugs. That was the problem that testing was about for them. And this testing mathematics is now the formula that I was using to teach them that they might need to expect something different. So let's start with the first number 20. So I have here, my paper, and I have already written here a single word. And for the number 20, we are playing, get your chats open and ready. We are playing a kids game called 20 questions. It is kind of like testing in the sense that we're looking for something that definitely exists, but we have no idea what it is. Well, we have some ideas. We could recognize that it's a word that I have written here on my paper. It's a single word. That's the rule of the game. And the way we are testing to figure out what that unknown word is, that we can ask questions. And like in testing, we have a budget of at most 20 questions. That's our budget. And we're supposed to be, with that budget, finding out what the word is. So I could now, ask you use this traditional test case oriented way of testing and write down all of your questions. That's not what I'm asking you to do. Instead, what we will be doing is using an exploratory testing strategy, meaning you can throw in some questions. I'll pick up one of them and I'll answer to that. I can answer yes or no, or I can't tell, kind of like not available. I might say which one, yes or no it is, like inconclusive. And based on the result, you can send me another set of questions. So let's get to it. Questions that I can answer yes or no. Figuring out what's the one word that I have here written in my little notebook. Go ahead, open your chats. Anyone can go first. I'll just pick something up from there. When there's silence, I often tell people that there is a general rule in testing that applies with this one as well. Even if you were looking at the ceiling and not knowing what to do because you were a little panicky, it is a better chance that you just do something, that you'll get over your panic, and the application will start kind of giving you feedback. So you should definitely ask something, and that, you know, time goes, the budget goes, even if you provided nothing as an output. So we have a couple of questions now here. So we have, does it have duplicate letters? Is it a noun? Is it related to testing? Number of characters, I can't answer yes or no. So you could guess, for example, does it have less than 6 characters? And then I could answer that. Is it a verb? It's a great example as a kind of like figuring out what category of a word it is. And to make this easier for you today, I'm going to pick up the example there. Is it a noun? Yes, it is a noun. You know it's a noun. You can kind of like, you know, figure out other things that it might be. What would you ask next? Out of these questions, you know, if I try to reuse this, the one with duplicate letters, I could actually look at this word here and say, yes, it has duplicate letters. So we have now used 2 questions, but it actually doesn't add as much information as the first one that I picked out of the list. So just add more questions if you think you have kind of now, based on these 2 answers already, something that you could guess as better. The third question that here is kind of relevant as well, still with the, you know, the questions that we have asked. Is the word related to testing? No, it's not. So kind of leaves us with the you know, all the other words in the world. And now that I start thinking of it out loud, isn't like all words like somehow related to testing. So I can definitely make a connection of this to testing, but I wasn't immediately thinking of it as a testing word. But, you know, all of this kind of explanation, I'm already breaking a little bit the rules of the game by explaining more than yes or no. But you need to add another set of questions. Could you figure out what the word is? Let's try a few more times. Just write your questions in the chat. I can give you a typical question that people often ask. Well, what's the context of the word? Again, I can't say yes or no to that question. So you could ask, is the context of the word something living, or is it an item? You could ask that type of questions. You could ask, well, let me answer that question actually. Is it living? Yes, it is living. So we're looking for something in the context and category of things that are living. Is it a person? That's a brilliant question. Now that we start to kind of, you know, little bit know. No, it's not a person. So we are somewhere around 5 on our budget right now on questions. Is it an animal? Yes, it's an animal. So now we have, only all of the different animals. So does it start from vowels where the A, B, C, A, E, and so on? No, it doesn't start with a vowel. Is it a pet? I have to say, I can't say on is it a pet. I think some people have this as pets, but it's definitely not a most common pet that people would have. So at this point, it's kind of like I feel like I should go Google all the animals and which ones of them are only domestic and only home animals. So there's a question on, is it a bird? Can it fly? Those are kind of similar, both of them. Yes, it can fly. And yes, it is a bird. And now kind of like, based on that, asking whether it's living in the jungle, I don't know if that's going to be the most relevant of the questions. It, still might be one that you would ask, but I would more like probably be saying, no, it's not living in the jungle as such. So we're kind of using the budget on that. But at this point, I'm going to kind of call the game off a little bit so that we can progress forward. The word is chicken. I think some of you didn't want to go using your budget with the idea of, guessing different types of birds. And I usually, for these kind of, training sessions, I use some kind of an easy word that is kind of commonly available. At least I would hope it is commonly available. I've been using cats and dogs for years on this one. But what I basically want to illustrate is that when you're looking for something that you don't even know the context in which it appears, it's going to be really difficult coming up with good test cases and good questions, because test cases are basically questions that help you go through your application to reveal that new information, the bugs that you're looking for. It's going to be very difficult unless you already have some knowledge. So it is probably better to start with playing with the application, which is called exploratory testing. And instead of fixing your test cases right in the beginning, what if you would do that only towards the end of the session? The other number here, number 16, I have another little exercise for you to do. So I hope the video plays. It shouldn't have sound, so I've turned the sound on. On this video, the number was 16. So you see two teams passing on balls. There's players in white and players in black shirts, and they pass the ball. And our task is to test how many times the players wearing white pass the ball. That's the test case. And since I wanted to give you a test case by traditional definitions of a test case, not the exploratory style, what I'm asking you to do is to be able to report expected result is 16. Is it a pass or is it a fail? And we'll use the hands up, like the reactions, actually. We'll use the reactions. If you think it's a pass, put like a thumbs up. And if it is not a pass, put a smiley in the end of the video. So let's play the video. So 16, pass or fail. So now it's time for using our little reactions. So out of the reactions, you can find the thumbs up, like I'm using right now, which is the test was a pass. Sorry, this one is now going away. Or use a smiley if the test was a fail. Can't actually see that while I'm screen sharing. What are your reactions? You maybe see the others' reactions. Usually it's about half and half. Half of the people say the test is a pass. Half of the people say the test is a fail. And in this particular case, the next question, of course, is there anything else to report? Usually in a group, there's someone who says, yeah, there's something else to report. The curtain changed color, and everyone else is like really wondering, what do you talk about the curtain changed color? Yes, it was bright red at one point, and then it was bright orange at other point. You might have missed that when we watched the video. Someone usually also mentions that, oh, there was the gorilla, and the gorilla was kind of like very visible in the middle of the screen. And you know, nowadays about 80% of people see the gorilla, because the nature of how people notice things and how we are focusing on the task at hand, it is sometimes harder for us to achieve actual full focus on one thing. So we are more likely to notice a little something on the side. But the more you focus, the less likely you are to see that gorilla. And also, you know, someone might mention things like, well, one of the players left the field in the middle of that video, which is, you know, kind of a relevant thing. So if we had these players and one of them left, you know, maybe that's at least something worthwhile mentioning, if that was something that was kind of like happening with the application that you're testing, that something is completely changing in the setting of that test. And that's definitely one of the things that almost everyone is actually missing watching this video. So I used the number 16 to show that the nature of testing means that the more detailed test cases we give you, the less likely you are to find the information that is supposed to be surprising by nature and important by kind of definition of the task assignment that you're getting to do while testing. The third one, 1639, is on, I have this little video here again, so I'll just share my screen. Pause this for a moment before I can full screen it. So I have a video here of the WordPad on Windows XP. And I was using this for quite many years, as long as Windows XP was available, and even with Windows Vista, there was a version of this bug. But the most recent Windows versions are actually fixing this one. So we have that sizing of text that we change. And when we change it, you can guess it, 1639 being the magic number, we get this error message saying that it is one too big. But there's another place where we can also go and change that. And now that we have seen what it does in one place in our application, if we change the same thing in a different place, we're expecting, for consistency reasons, of course, to get the same error message. And when we don't, we think we found a bug. So I used this particular example with 1639 in my mathematics to show this idea that we would typically have multiple different routes. And the final number, I don't actually have an exercise on that one. There's one on limits of our memory, but the final one is then for reminding us that we actually do need to take notes, create checklists, even if we don't write test cases beforehand. As we are moving along, we are supposed to keep track of what we're doing, or otherwise it is not a good way of doing exploratory testing. So that's the kind of experience part. But if we then move from this experience to experiences in companies, I've had 3 different entry points that I very typically hear and see. The first one being that people who have been creating test cases based on specifications, they get these sessions like Friday afternoon, let's all get together and forget everything we normally do, and let's just be free and do some exploratory testing. That's a good way of kind of getting started. And some people's first experience to exploratory testing is that's, you know, one afternoon every now and then that someone else schedules for you, but you're working traditionally in the other time. Another way of getting with this is, some organizations giving people repeated list of test cases, kind of, when you get to the end of the list, you start again from the beginning. And what you can do then in variation is, you could start in the middle, or you could start in the end and do it the other way around, basically repeating the same list. What happens with these people for how they find exploratory testing, they have a conference awakening of some sort, that they could actually not obey the steps in their test cases and start stretching those test cases. And just do, if it says use user ABC, create a new user and use that user instead, at least add to the line of seeing problems. But my first experiences, and pretty much actually all of my career, is that I started with given an assignment. I was given some documentation that helped me get started. I was given a budget, and I was given someone else going after me, doing a quality assurance on my testing results. And if they found relevant problems that I should have found when I was doing my responsible work in the same area, in that particular case where I started off 25 years ago, we would not be getting our extra bonuses. So we had a financial incentive to actually do the best testing possible, and doing specifications to test is not the best testing possible. So I've been always doing full on exploratory testing. Those three ways are kind of like ways of scoping. You extend single test cases and just, not obey your own orders that you have created in your test cases. You can have days or time boxes where you are completely free. But my usual scope is that the whole project, all of the testing that I'm doing, is in the frame of exploratory testing. And then within that, we are splitting it into somehow smaller pieces so that it is more manageable. From the perspective of management, usually people come to this kind of like, for the tester, it's actually a lot more motivating, not having to just tick off the box of same test cases again and again and again, and actually try to understand what is changing and why are we testing and what kind of new things could we be expecting, and kind of target based on the latest changes the testing that you're doing. So there's a lot of kind of, positives on the tester side, but also from the manager side, like, the value that you get from this style of testing, the ability to see and control and guide and things like that. I would never change back away from it. And results is the core of exploratory testing. You are both from the management and the tester point of view, you're optimizing for the results in the time that you're using on testing. So figuring that out somehow together, I can't really say which side it has it. There's a lot of kind of ideas on how do we actually structure this. And my favorite way of structuring exploratory testing is kind of like rehearsing myself with these A4 papers, where I had basically an empty paper that I would start the morning with. On the top of the paper, I would have post-it notes that I usually would move. The mission one, I would usually move it from the previous day, because usually the purpose why my organization has hired me, I didn't learn something relevant about that every single day, but I did eventually, all the time learn about the purpose of how would I frame my mission so that I remember what's my responsibility. So I would also improve that. But for the charter, that's kind of like a big test case. What was I planning on doing today? I would, think of it before I got started so that I could keep myself on what I was doing. On the bottom of the page, kind of, thinking of it as kind of split into 4 areas. I had things where I would put details. I had usually 3 kinds of details that I was writing down. The bug, obviously. Bugs, the questions, things that I want to interrupt others to explain to me how this is supposed to work. And then I had what I marked usually as an X, an idea of documentation I want to leave behind. And I've already now for almost 5 years actually left a lot of documentation behind in the form of automation. So the X's very often for me are ideas that I want automated, and I can do that in another exploratory session, because that's how you create automation. You explore, and then you explore with the code It's just a little bit different dynamic on doing it. And finally, on the bottom corner, other charters, things that might be useful to me as ideas of what could I do tomorrow, but the commitment only happens in my start of the day. So this kind of all the four little things to think of from a tester's point of view kind of go together in this management frame that, you know, at minimum, if you are a tester who can't report bugs, if only you know about those bugs, you are kind of like a refrigerator light that is only on when the door is closed, not much use. So that's the minimum outcome that you have to have. But all these other things, kind of like keeping lists of things to do in the future that you can share in your team, creating some kind of metrics, making summaries, having someone to manage and grow you, creating some kind of quality reports, all of these different pieces of management framework usually are good to have when you have more than a single person around doing the work. There's also tools available. So this cheat sheet by Elizabeth Hendrickson and James Lindsay and Dale Emery is actually a really good source of quick test ideas. Like you could try things like the Goldilocks. You try values that are too big, too large, too small, and just right, like the Goldilocks and the Bears story goes. But this is kind of like distilled wisdom from the past generation of testers on what kind of things often cause problems. And I would like to hope that with Agile and the quality levels going up, it would no longer be as easy as that. Similarly, on tools, Exploratory Testing Dynamics, it's a 4-page document that kind of gives you 4 different perspectives of maybe you want to consider what is your output, like what kind of work products are you agreeing in your own team to create? How do you think in a versatile way, which is the testing polarities? How you put your current project context together with whatever the testing wisdom around the world says, that's the test strategy. And what skills do you need so that you can do this very effectively? And in particular, I want to emphasize that the skills are growing. It never ends. Knowing how to manage yourself is something that it's a forever practicing area. But the ideas about how would we test things and kind of like just having all the different sources available, even using Jira, old Jira reports as a source of ideas of what might still be failing in similar ways in the future. All of that is really, really, really relevant. But getting kind of then to summarizing this, in exploratory testing, there is documentation. Documentation is considered output rather than input. And as an output of the testing we do today, it's of course then input for the maintenance period of the application. And maintenance is not just trying to keep the software alive. There's a lot of adjusting to the changing expectations and conditions. So we are trying to create documentation that makes our future selves lives easier. And we are best equipped to do that when we have first done the testing work rather than before we get to doing the testing work. I put in as just samples for you, some examples of what does documentation usually look like. Bug reports in some kind of maybe a mind map. It might be a really pretty test strategy that you leave for whoever comes after you on how did you end up learning that the test strategy should have been or could have been, but whoever comes after you should also then look at this as in like, well, this is not the strategy that I should use later. It was the output of the previous one. Maybe it's helpful, but it is not saying that we now have taken care of all the future risks with one. So it's a reference that you can against. Or it could be even this. This is very typical documentation for me nowadays out of exploratory testing. Yes, it is test automation. It is executable specifications about a particular little app that we could use. I can leave that documentation behind, if it's automated. I can make it run so that it actually holds true. My automation keeps my documentation up to date. But also I can just, create it for that time frame when I was doing exploratory testing and throw some of it away. So in conclusion to all of this, I absolutely love exploratory testing. I think it is an approach. It's not a technique, it's an approach. And it's an approach in its contemporary modern format where, originally you didn't want to separate test design and test execution because for you to learn, you need to have those, kind of close to one another. That's how you keep the documentation as an output and you maximize your results. But now in the modern world, it is the same actually with automation. You do not want to separate manual and automation. You want to keep those also intertwined in the same way. And the only reasons why I would not ask for someone with programming skills when I look for a great tester, the only reason is that that person is a newbie and they will be learning to automate and program with me and with my team. And it usually takes about a week before they're already contributing in automation. The coding part is not the difficult part. The idea generation part, the learning part is the difficult part. And the human part, the agency, the power for us holding it within ourselves when we are doing testing, that we can make and we should be making those decisions of what questions we're asking. And we are not given those questions from the outside, but we are given the expectation that we need to find the information that the others have missed. Thank you. So I actually, I had still this blind spot, but that's what I was planning on skipping for today. All right. Do we have still a moment for questions?
Yes, we can take if anyone has a question to Marit.
Any questions? Any brave people in the audience?
I think they are ready for the quiz competition.
Yeah, they're wondering what to fill in for the wondering. There was probably actually something on this. Let me just share this again.
Okay.
I can find my buttons. That sometimes this is a little older slide on these strengths and blind spots. I don't think there are blind spots to exploratory testing for real. I think there's blind spots to people, and we have the same blind spots and actually worse blind spots if we are trying to do test case oriented testing, and if we don't ask for the tester to be actively looking for the best possible information they can provide. But the bug finding rates on the strength side is definitely my experience. If no questions right now, I would just kind of emphasize that you can always find me online. So I would be happy to link with any of you on LinkedIn. And I'd be happy to also have conversations on Twitter. That's kind of the platform where I'm hanging out the most. And I think testing is, it's a fun activity, and it's at its best when it's done in social settings. So pair up, and if you feel like pairing up with me, ping me on Twitter. I have DMs open there, and it might be fun to do something together.
Yeah. So yes, Marit, thank you so much for the session. This is quite refreshing and I really enjoyed, and I think we have learned a lot from it. So we cannot thank enough for your valuable time. So thank you once again. Okay, so with that, we come to the end of the Quality Week, day one. So we sincerely hope you will learn something useful from the topic today. The exploratory testing, explain and experience. So we would appreciate if you could spend a few minutes and fill your feedback of this session with the link. I'm going to share it right now. Okay, here's the link. So you can provide your feedback. And yeah, so also don't forget to join with us tomorrow, 5 p.m. for the Quality Week Day 2. So with that, we can wind up the session. So yeah, have a nice day, guys. Good night.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot,
Thank
Marat, for
you.
your
Good night.
brilliant session. Thanks a lot.